We love Nigel Farage for a whole bunch of reasons, the former Brexit leader and GB News host. We certainly love him because, like the rest of us, he thinks that Prince Harry has been oversharing for too long.
Yeah, I think this episode comes into the category of what I would call too much information. I don't think we needed to know this particularly. And I feel very sorry for the woman. As you say, the idea she was an older woman is ludicrous. You know, she was 100 weeks older than Harry. But also, you know, for her to be exposed like this to the full national media, to have to come out, put her hands up and admit it, I mean, it's very embarrassing for her family. He just didn't need to do this. But you see, they don't care. They wreak a trail of destruction behind them wherever they go, whether it's family, friends, staff, everybody falls out. Lawsuits become inevitable. But the good news is that in America, you know, even on the West Coast, the land of woke, even there, their popularity poll ratings are now the lowest they've ever been. And I genuinely think this time next year, you and I won't be talking about them. They'll be passé, they'll be over.
Bloody oath. Well, maybe that might happen via a court proceeding. Samantha Markle, half-sister of Meghan, well, she served some legal papers on them.
Yes, and, you know, endless court cases with Harry and Meghan suing the British media. You know, the family now, Samantha involved with this writ. And the one I feel most sorry for is Thomas Markle, who strikes me as being a very good, decent, hard-working man, a man not on a particularly big salary, who spent a fortune getting his daughter educated, put through college, and when she came into marrying into royalty, she decided he wasn't quite good enough, he wasn't quite smart enough. And he's the guy that's been cast out, and I think hurt more than anybody. These are very, very unpleasant people, but there's a lesson. Anyone you meet in the modern world that talks about love and peace and equality and diversity, anyone that sells to you their virtue nearly always turn out to be the most unpleasant people you've ever met.
Bloody oath. So Obama was able to kill Osama bin Laden. Trump was able to kill the head of ISIS. Joe Biden was able to shoot a balloon out of the air 4 days after he asked for the balloon to be shot out of the air. A perfect example of how anemic this president is, especially how the Chinese were willing to test him, knowing that he doesn't even have the balls to blow up a balloon on time.
Well, you're right, because for almost 4 days, that balloon was crossing America, potentially crossing some of their nuclear sites, some of their great military sites. So who knows what photographic evidence went back to Beijing during the time that the old duffer dithered. And in the end, of course, genius. He shoots it down over the Atlantic Ocean, and now the kit is thousands of feet down on the seabed, and they may never ever find it. So whichever way you cut this, it's been a complete and utter disaster. And he just gets worse as president. His vice president, Kamala Harris, becomes even more unpopular. So the Democrats, you know, let's remember, the next presidential election is not that far away. You know, 2024 is just around the corner. Goodness knows who they're going to choose. At least the Republicans have a choice between two very competent men.
And interesting to note, Trump's sort of come back a bit in the polls of recent days. Obviously, not as many people in the race. We'll wait and see how it all goes. But you're right. One side's got a wonderful series of choices. The other's got a whole series of, well, they're going to have to prop somebody up and pretend that everyone's got to go to the basement again. Also, speaking about the ghosts of Prime Ministers past, Liz Truss has decided to find a way to fight for her legacy, her sort of, month and a couple of days long legacy as the Prime Minister of the UK. And I think that to some degree she has a point when she talks about how the left-wing establishment went completely crazy at her solutions when it came to the economy. What are your thoughts about her trying to, I don't know, sort of recast the narrative so soon after leaving office?
Well, it wasn't just the financial markets and those on the left. I mean, this was a globalist coup. I mean, the IMF in Washington, the White House, and of course our own Bank of England. So she has a fair point that she makes. You know what? She may not have been the right person for the job. I mean, frankly, she wasn't up to it. But these arguments she's now making about reducing the size of the state, giving people incentives through lower taxation, without these things, what is the point of a British Conservative Party? Because under Rishi, and indeed under Boris, We've seen the tax burden go up to the highest for over 70 years. I mean, it's as if the big state now will look after us from the moment of conception to the moment of death. And I think she's actually making a very, very valuable and important contribution to public debate. The problem for the Tories is they're now split three ways. You've got the Rishiites, who like stability, the Trussites, who want a more radical conservative economic agenda, and the Borisites, who sort of think he's the king across the water that's going to come back and save them. So they're now split three ways. So really, I mean, look, they haven't got a cat's chance in hell at the next election, and they don't deserve to. But what Truss is doing is beginning to make the arguments for when they're in opposition as to what their future is going to be. And as I say, whatever her deficiencies, and gosh, when it comes to public speaking, there are many, but in terms of the argument she's making, I think it's very important.
But also I think that, and again, I don't hold a candle for Liz Truss in any way, and I know you don't either, but what happened in part to her was there's process in government, and process in government can sometimes be just ignored or scandalised. And as we saw with Trump, anyone who is any sort of legitimate disruption to the way things work, well, everything that is the process of government becomes scandalised. Any attempt to change the way it's always been done, instantly scandalised. And it just felt like the noise around her premiership was disproportionate to what was actually going on.
Well, you'd have thought that what she proposed was some really massive, huge change. Actually, what that budget proposed was reducing the size of the state in the United Kingdom by 0.5%. That's all. 0.5% of GDP was going to go from government back to individuals and the private sector. But, you know, the late, great economist Milton Friedman, he talked about the worst tyranny in the world is the tyranny of the status quo. And it's those with good jobs, good salaries, comfortable positions, and they never want any change at all. And, you know, what we've really got now across the Western world are governments that want to control our lives, governments that want to be taxed and spend. And that's right across from Australia to America, through Europe. And what Truss was trying to do was, in a way, what Margaret Thatcher tried to do 40 years ago, and that's to roll back the frontiers of the state and to say to individuals, do you know what? We're going to get off your back. You go out there, make money, employ people, pay your taxes. And, you know, if we look at the long history of economics over the last 150 years, all the evidence is where individuals are given opportunity to go out and succeed, you know what? They do.